In 1907, when Oklahoma officially became a state, descendants of Creek Freedmen were granted land allotments. And as one of them, a girl named Sarah Rector received her parcel. But she had no idea what to do with it. That land was useless for anything except tornadoes and snakes. Her father said they needed to sell it. But one day, Sarah heard something beneath her land. She heard oil moving underground, like a rapidly flowing river. But Sarah's parents didn't believe her, and they didn't even have the $30 to pay the property tax. But Sarah was certain she had heard oil. She said God gave her ears to hear it. He gave her the land for a reason. So Sarah and her father Joe began visiting oil companies in Muskogee. But those people wouldn't even allow a black man to enter their offices. They kept throwing Joe out. Joe went to a company called Pan Oklahoma Petroleum, but they mistook him for the garbage man. Meanwhile, Sarah walked into a cafe. But this cafe was for whites only. A man sitting there offered the thirsty Sarah a lemonade instead of water. After Sarah drank the lemonade, the waitress picked up her glass with a towel. Sarah tried to thank the man, but the waitress quickly escorted her outside. On the other side, Joe was handed the trash. He said, "I'm not here for the trash. I came to ask if you'll drill for oil on my daughter's land." Just then, Sarah rushed in. She said, "I have 160 acres, and there's oil beneath it." Sarah even pointed out her spot on the map. She could read a map. Big Jim went with them to their land. He said it was definitely a long shot drilling out there, for sure. It would take a lot of money and resources from the company. They would have to drill hundreds of feet deep into the earth. It would take months, so Sarah said they had to lease the land first. Big Jim, impressed by her intelligence, presented his standard contract. "I'll give you 50 cents per acre for 6 months." But Sarah knew the standard rate wasn't 50 cents, it was $1. She demanded a 1/8 royalty on top of that. Big Jim said, "All right, I'll give you 8 points if there's a gusher." Sarah read through the entire contract first. When Joe asked her about it, she explained the royalty to him. So for the next 3 months, the Pan-Oki company started drilling. Work continued at full speed. But after 3 months, Big Jim said they came up dry. "You can keep the equipment. It costs more to haul it away than to leave it." Hearing this, Sarah felt defeated. But just a few days later, a man came to their house to buy the land. He told Joe, "How about we discuss it man to man?" Joe asked Sarah to leave. As Sarah walked away, she said it was her land. She stood off to the side, listening to everything. The man offered Joe $2 per acre. Joe said the county office told him it was worth $3. The man replied, "Are you getting cagey with me? Joe said this is my daughter's land. I need to make a little profit." The man immediately offered $6. Joe said it was a fair offer, but I need to ask my daughter first. Hearing this, the buyer turned around and left. But Sarah understood that Pan-Oki must have sent this man. They had clearly found something there, and now they wanted it for themselves. Sarah's mother Rose quickly pulled out the land deed. White folks can do whatever they want with land, as long as they have this. The entire family rushed to hide the deed in the ground. But then they saw a car approaching. Sarah's family hid. These men, armed with guns, entered the house and began searching for the deed. Sarah's dog Blue ran toward them, barking, but they shot him. The men left. Big Jim got angry at them. "Now they know that we want it." Meanwhile, Sarah's dog Blue, wounded by the gunshot, ran off somewhere. Sarah said that deed is a curse. "They'll shoot us too." But Rose said you were the one who said God gave you that land for a reason. The next day, Sarah went looking for her dog. All she found was his collar. But while searching for Blue, Sarah ended up at an oil camp. She wasn't afraid to walk among these rough men. And that's where she ran into Bert again, the man from the cafe. Sarah told him, "We met at the cafe, and you were circling names in the newspaper." Bert's partner Mace said, "Yeah, that must have been him." Bert was also searching for oil. He called himself a finder and a wildcatter. Sarah explained, "There's oil beneath my land. Pan-Oki leased my land and tried to dump me by saying it's dry. And they sent a hustler to trick me into selling the land outright, offering me $6 an acre for a dry hole. Sarah needed a partner now, someone who could help her bring the oil up. But Bert said, "Good luck with that, honeybee." Hearing this, Sarah became angry. I'm offering you a business deal, and you're treating me like a child. Bert stood up and walked back towards Sarah. He asked her about her land. Bert didn't have his own equipment to pull the oil out. Sarah said, "No problem. Pan-Oki left all their equipment on my land." Hearing this, Bert grabbed his partner Mace and headed out with Sarah. But Sarah said, "Before we go, we need to work out our terms." They agreed on a 50-50 split and shook hands. Bert was excited when he saw the Grade A equipment. He said, "That's good ground too. It's a classic anticline dome." Bert got Sarah's parents' blessing and began drilling. Pan-Oki had already drilled 1,000 feet deep. After they abandoned the rig, they gave it a new name, Sarah's Oil. One day while talking, Bert explained, "Mace and I started with gold and silver, and now we've moved on to oil. We've done it all. I once made 70 grand on a gusher, and then I lost it all on the very next dry hole." They were certain there was oil here. The question was, how much? Just then, Big Jim showed up. Mace ran inside and grabbed a gun. Big Jim said, "This is my land. I'll give you 20 minutes to leave." He had the lease. Big Jim had smudged the date and altered it. Sarah said, "That's no better than kids cheating at school." Bert aimed his gun at Big Jim. Big Jim called Bert a bunco man, someone who cons women out of their money. Big Jim offered Sarah $20 an acre, but Sarah said, "I ain't selling." Big Jim's arrival made Bert realize there was a lot of oil here, and they were getting ready to fight them for it. One day while drilling, their machine started having trouble. Bert told Mace to stop the machine. Everyone was afraid the machine would explode. Mace checked from below and said the machine was stuck. They were almost 1,500 feet down. But this might be the end of the road. We'll have to abandon the well. But Mace said, "We could dynamite the loose rock." Bert thought it was too dangerous and would require a lot of explosives. Just then, Sarah said, "No wonder you guys come up with nothing but dry holes. You give up too easily." Mace suggested trying a wall hook, but that idea only worked half the time, and wall hooks were hard to find, and they'd need more equipment, which would cost more money. Sarah said, "My teacher says everything in life has value. What do we have here of value?" Hearing this, Bert got an idea. He took Sarah and a mud sample to a geologist to have it tested. The test would cost $10. Bert pulled money from all over his clothes and scraped together the $10. The test would take a few hours. Bert and Sarah went out for a walk, and Bert ran into a woman there. Bert claimed to know her dead husband, who was going to buy small oil leases in her name. Bert charmed the woman with his words. She invited him to dinner. In other words, Bert had flirted with this woman before. A little while later, the geologist told them the oil was likely a few thousand feet deeper, and it wasn't good oil because it was heavily mixed with salt water. Bert and Sarah felt discouraged again, but something didn't feel right to Bert. They waited there for a while. As soon as the geologist stepped outside, Bert grabbed him. "Where are you going?" The geologist was taking the sample to Pan-Oki. They had paid him off. Now they'd have to get the sample tested properly. Bert said, "There's an old man in this coon town up there. Coon is a racist term." Hearing it, Sarah became angry. Bert realized he'd said something wrong. He apologized to Sarah. Sarah said, "That kind of talk comes automatic to some people." Bert said, "But that ain't me." Sarah said, "The town coming up is Taft. It's a black town. My town." They went to see a man who didn't have a degree from any recognized school, but he said, "I know more than any still living geologist." He charged $5 for the test. Bert and Sarah sat there, waiting for the test to finish. When the test was done, the geologist became excited. He said, "I have never seen anything like this. It's got density that's alarming." The gravity reading came in at 40 degrees, which was the lightest. The crude was so pure that the field could be the richest in all of Oklahoma. Sarah's got trainloads of oil, but their well was stuck, and they needed a lot of money to fix it. Mace said, "Should we rob a bank now?" So the next day, Bert went to the bank to ask for a loan. He showed them his sample. Bert needed $2,000 to buy a wall hook. But the bank wouldn't give a loan on a clogged well. It was too risky. As he was leaving, Bert noticed some women. He began flirting with them outside a cafe. He took one woman after another into the same cafe. Sarah was watching all of this from a distance. She walked straight over to them. "I'm Bert's business partner." She laid out her proposition in front of the woman. "We need equipment, and it's expensive." Sarah said, "Bert was talking to another girl, too. She's nice and all, but I don't think he likes her as much as you." The waitress there told the marshal to step in. As soon as Bert and Sarah saw the marshal, they stood up and left. Bert went and bought explosives. The seller saw Sarah and started walking toward her. Bert said, "She's with me." Just as the seller was about to make a racist remark, Bert punched him. When they got home, the marshal told them that a couple of Creek Nation kids were murdered in their sleep. He came there to warn other families. Sarah started crying inside the house. Those children were her classmates. Rose became afraid. "My daughter isn't safe either." She told Bert, "My daughter is the salt of my earth and the sun in my sky. Nothing happens to her." The next day, May said to Bert, "What did you give those widows in exchange for their money?" "More than you own, I bet. And that kind of deal gets you thrown into the jailhouse." Bert said, "We needed the money, and I got it. Now hurry up and get to work." They started the engine again. Everyone was glad to see everything running once more. But the trouble wasn't over. The machine got stuck again. And just then, several cars were coming their way. Panoki's legal counsel arrived to hand Sarah some papers. It was a legal filing demanding the return of all Panoki's equipment and a claim on all the oil. They had filed a claim on the land based on the sublease Sarah signed. They claimed Sarah had unlawfully forced them off the land. Bert laughed. "An 11-year-old girl threw you out?" Bert made it clear. "Any of you Panoki goons step foot on this land, and we will shoot you." The counsel quietly told Bert, "My employer has a generous offer for you, and you know this whole matter could be tied up in the courts for years." But Bert rejected the offer without even hearing it, so they started beating him. Bert sat in the car with Big Jim. Big Jim said, "What a wonderful business we're in. But what's this little girl going to do with all that money? Courts have concerns. Local judges are tired of dealing with an uneducated and underage ex-slave population. The state is insisting on white guardians. Bert only had to become Sarah's guardian, and after that, he could sell the land to Panoki." Bert thought for a moment and demanded 15 points in return. Big Jim said, "Standard royalty is 12.5. Bert said, "If you want me to Welsh on this girl, you gotta make it worth it for me." Big Jim agreed. After that, Bert went to Sarah and told her entire family to grab their rifles and leave the house. Rose said in fear, "If they want the land, they can have it." Rose was only worried about her daughter's safety. Bert told Mace about the Panoki deal. "We'll get 15%. 15%. And you heard Sarah's mom. They want out. And the well is spiked. The best thing we can do is let the big dogs come in and spud a new well." But Mace didn't want to betray Sarah. Bert said, "In the world we live in, they're not going to let a colored girl hold onto a mother lode this size. And besides, I'm going to make it up to her later." Meanwhile, when Sarah's family got back home, their dog had returned. He was alive. Everyone was happy to see him. That night, Rose asked Sarah, "If I had asked you before, what would you give to have Old Blue back?" Sarah said, "Everything." Rose asked, "You still feel that way?" Rose believed it was a sign. The very next day, Bert came to get Sarah to sign the guardianship papers. Sarah said, "This makes you the boss of my life." Bert said, "I need you to trust me, because I understand the system and how to work it." As Sarah signed, she looked at her parents. She asked Bert, "This is so you can protect me, right?" Bert said, "Yes." Sarah signed. Now there would be a court hearing to make sure everything was confirmed. Sarah shook Bert's hand, just like before. Bert left. Joe didn't trust Bert very much. He's been chasing wealth his whole life. Is he worthy of trust? Sarah believed he was. Her father didn't. Sarah's mom said, "Well, I won't allow this at my kitchen table. We can't see what's inside a person's heart. But tomorrow we can walk into that courtroom with our heads held high." That meant Sarah would have to speak before the judge. Rose said, "God will give you the words." Outside the courthouse, many black people came to support Sarah and oppose the white guardian law, because many guardians were stealing oil-rich land from those they represented. And everyone had learned there was oil beneath Sarah's land. Sarah arrived at court. A woman named Miss Barnard volunteered to offer her services on Sarah's behalf, but the judge told her to sit back down. The judge confirmed everything directly with Sarah. Sarah asked, "Why can't my parents do it? The state gave me that property because of my ancestors." She said, "When the land had only weeds and lizards, it was all mine. But when people discovered oil on it, they started thinking it was theirs, and I have to get a white guardian." Sarah only wanted to keep what had been given to her. She asked, "Isn't that what the law's for?" The black people in the courtroom began supporting Sarah. The judge adjourned the hearing and granted guardianship to Bert. Bert's thoughts were racing. As soon as they stepped outside, Joe asked Bert for a copy of the documents. Miss Barnard would monitor everything on their behalf. Bert handed over the papers. Bert told Sarah, "I just need you to trust me." Then he went straight to Big Jim. He said, "I need 15 points, and not just for her land, but for every parcel around it." Bert knew Sarah's land had 40.6 gravity, and Big Jim was buying the surrounding parcels to steal their oil. Big Jim quietly accepted Bert's terms. Bert added, "And I want her safety guaranteed." Sarah saw Bert walking into the Pinoche office. She went up to him and said, "You said you'd do right by me." Bert said, "And I am. I've got a plan. The oil business is hard." Bert said, "You'll get your share." But Sarah said, "This ain't about me. It's about your soul, Mr. Bert Smith." Mace dropped Sarah's family off at home, but on his way back, he noticed a hidden car. It was Pinoche's men. They pulled out guns and confronted Mace. Mace drew his gun too, but there were two of them. They killed Mace. Hearing the gunshots, Rose told her two children to run toward Creek Nation. Pinoche's men had arrived outside their house. Rose grabbed a knife. Joe grabbed his gun. A short time later, Bert saw Pinoche's men driving away. Miss Barnard appeared in front of Bert. She was escorting a journalist named Mr. Farr to meet Sarah. Bert asked her to take him along. When they arrived, Joe came out holding his gun. He explained that Pinoche's men had come for Sarah. "I had to shoot to make them leave." Bert went searching for Mace and found only his lifeless body. Miss Barnard said, "Sarah is next. They still hold a legal claim to the land based on what you signed. And they want her dead, so someone like me can't rush back to court." Bert said, "What if we go back to that judge and cancel the guardianship and transfer it to you?" But for that, they'd need to find Sarah. Sarah, her little brother, and the dog were waiting for their people at South Stream, following their mother's instructions. Pinoche's men entered Creek territory. They asked about a colored girl. "We just want the girl." Getting no answer, they moved on. Meanwhile, Sarah was praying, "Help me, Jesus." And then she saw a car driving toward her, but it was Pinoche's thugs. Sarah told her brother to run. The thugs began shooting at them. But just then, the tribal police arrived. Sarah's family came right behind them. Rose reunited with her children. Sarah learned about Mace's murder. Bert apologized to her for everything. Barnard went before the judge. The young woman's guardianship needs to be reconsidered, and America is watching as her life remains in danger. The judge understood and found an error in the paperwork. Bert wasn't from Oklahoma. He was from Texas. But he had claimed in the documents that he was an Oklahoma resident. He couldn't prove full Oklahoma residency. Because of that, the guardianship became null and void. Sarah appointed Miss Barnard as her new guardian. The judge would inform Pinoche of this, but he warned them to be ready. Bert had a plan to stop Pinoche. He brought dynamite. Rose asked, "What is this for?" Bert said, "We bury that dynamite about 1,000 feet underground. So either that well will cave in on itself, or it will bring up everything we've been hoping for." The next morning, Big Jim arrived at Sarah's land. He came carrying a white flag, just to talk. Bert allowed him inside. Rose hid both her children. Big Jim said, "You people want a war?" Joe said, "No, just leave." Big Jim had hidden a machine gun in his car. Everyone took cover. Sarah quickly detonated the dynamite inside the well. Everything began shaking. Oil burst out of the ground. Sarah ran toward it, filled with joy. Big Jim said, "That's my oil." He pulled out his gun, but Bert stopped him. "I've planted dynamite on your surrounding wells, too." As Big Jim aimed his gun at Sarah, Joe shot the gun out of his hand. The police arrested him. Sarah danced with joy, watching her oil. Her dream had come true. Sometime later, everyone was celebrating. But then the widow appeared, the one Bert had borrowed money from. Bert would have to leave. When Sarah saw him going, she asked, "Where are you going?" Bert explained that the widow owned 250% of his share. Sarah said, "But we're partners. I'll help you." But Bert didn't want to take Sarah's money. Sarah had already taught him so much. She spoke about his soul, something no one had ever done before. Bert said, "I'm a treasure hunter. Some other treasure is out there waiting for me." Despite Sarah's protests, he said goodbye and left. After that, Sarah did many things. But the first thing she did was buy that cafe and open it to everyone. And with that, friends, this story comes to an end. Let us know in the comments how you liked this explanation. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.